in a world of way too many noisy markets, the ability for any particular organization to cut through that clutter is challenging.
Yeah.
And I think that, AI, if anything, is going to make this incredibly harder. If you can imagine this dystopian vision of, the AI bot writing the email and the co-pilot in Outlook reading the email, and like there are no humans involved, you're going to have to find more authentic ways to connect with people. And the I'm not arguing that there are net new tactical channels out there. Yes, there's communities. Yes, there is social. Yes, there are peer reviews. Yes, there are analyst write-ups. All of this is percolating, creating for you a brand. What we're arguing makes it modern is much more about the targeting here of first prioritizing what it is that you're going after, harvesting all of that using generative tools, AI tools that will bring this in, analyzing it, augmenting it, and then pushing out that message into multiple tactical channels. The strategy here is more than social listening. It's more than just leveraging social media. It's using generative tools to do what humans can't do. And that is they're incredibly strong at bringing together multiple ideas, synthesizing those ideas, and when prompted correctly, creating the kind of breakthrough messaging that differentiates yourself from competitors. And my last point here, we would do these kinds of things in the past on a periodic basis. I think what the technology allows us to do going forward is a continual harvesting and analyzing and reacting. You don't have to be on your back heels reacting to competitors' change in messaging. Once that's in there, putting it in the model, finding out what you're saying, what you need to change, how you might do this, it really turbocharges our capacity to have more authentic communications that is personalized to the needs, not creepy. And that is the real difference here.
You are listening to Power Marketing with Kevin Lee. Kevin and his agency Did It have helped thousands of businesses win through superior marketing, as have his books, articles, speaking engagements, and the E-Marketing Association Power Marketing podcasts. Here's Kevin.
Hi, I'm Kevin Lee with the E-Marketing Association. I spend most of my week running Did It, a digital-first marketing agency. Started in search 27 years ago and through 11 acquisitions has become pretty much full service. Also run Giving Forward, a nonprofit in the cause marketing category. And I bought Truth Nutrition about a year ago as a place to run experiments that no sane client would let me run under Did It. So I'm super excited to be chatting with Gary Survis today, who is an operating partner at Insight Partners, which most people know as a venture capital firm. But clearly their best interests are in making sure that their portfolio companies succeed. And within the marketing sphere, I think Gary is a super valuable part of that entire process as an operating partner. So Gary, why don't you give us a quick elevator pitch of what the on-site team does for the portcos within Insight?
Yes, well, thanks, Kevin, for having me here. And I think Insight is unique in that there are two very distinct portions of our organization. There's the investing team, which finds companies, invests in companies, is very much the strategic advisors to the CEO. They're on the board, et cetera. And then there is our on-site team, which is our operating team. And this has really been structured around centers of excellence. So there's marketing, sales, product, talent, customer success, and that list goes on, all led by operators like myself. I'm a former CMO. And our job is really to help portfolio companies grow from everything from our early investments to our growth investments through to our late stage investments. And so we really have a unique perspective on companies scaling. And I would add that, one of the pieces that makes Onsite unique is that Insight has over 500 portfolio companies. And so we have incredible signal recognition. We have incredible capacity to learn what's working, what's not working, what's changing. And so I think that makes it very unique in terms of our perspective that we bring to marketing.
Great. So that's really helpful. I imagine that often shortly after an investment, you and your team get an opportunity to, dig deep past just the due diligence that was originally done, but really get into figuring out what the operating challenges and opportunities are for the portfolio companies, the newer portfolio companies. Are there common themes that you see reoccurring where you're like, okay, this is some low-hanging fruit that we can go after right away that will allow increased scale and or increased profitability and certain driving the KPIs that you've been tasked with?
Yeah, I think it's a really important thing to understand that the challenge that an early company has is going to be different than a growth company than a late stage company. So early companies are always focused on product market fit. Their job is to figure that out, pivot, evolve the product, ensure that they're getting in market, that they're getting tests, that they're trying messaging and positioning, they're trying to focus on that, trying to create a demand gen engine. And so all of these pieces are typical for what you're going to see in that early company. As you move to a growth company, now it's the time where we're putting more fuel on the fire and we're really trying to build out more mature go-to-market motions. We're trying to help those organizations figure out how are they going to talk about the category that they're competing in? What is their analyst relations strategy? How are they going to figure out if they want to expand into a new geo? What kind of marketing do we need to support that? And as you move into late, it's a bit of a mixed bag because our late companies have two things going on. One is acquisitions. Many of our later stage companies are growing through acquisition, and in so doing, it's important to create a narrative around that acquisition that helps the market understand what they do, that they're not just simply a bag of rocks, but they are truly a company that's delivering unique capabilities. And then I think the second part is maturing out what marketing is. Where are their gaps? Where are their opportunities? Sometimes a website that served them well in early stages is no longer even relevant as they get to the later stages. So it really is a wide variety of challenges as companies move through each of these different stages.
Those are great points. A lot of times for startups, whether they're early, middle, or late stage, but in particular when they're earlier stage, uh, the founders like to think of themselves as in a category by themselves, right? They're like, oh, no, no, we don't fit within that Gartner or Forrester grid or whatever. And so they sort of say, no, no, we are outside of that. But of course, the broader ecosystem, the buyers in particular, want to understand, okay, well, what are the substitutes for this, or what are the alternatives to this, or how do I make my buying decision? So as you're chatting with the marketing teams of these companies at the early to mid stage, and they're still sort of focused on what makes us different, potentially in their minds, so different that they deserve their own quadrant. How do you sort of work through those positioning statements so that they can take share from those other companies that maybe, overlap in the Venn diagram 70% with what they do, but not 100%?
Yeah, I think that's an awesome question. I'll start by saying categories were created for a very particular reason, which, as you noted, is to help the purchaser navigate a world of too much choice.
Right.
And in so doing, there are these organizations like Gartner and Forrester who their job is to understand categories and, quite honestly, evolve categories over time. It is the rare company, rare. WalkMe, one of our portfolio companies that did digital adoption platforms, is one of those rare examples of companies. We currently have another one, Island, in the enterprise browser space. Again, truly great category creators. But the most important part is they don't go to the analyst and say, hey, I've got a category for you. Don't you want to put us in here? This is really doing what analysts want to do, which is learn. And we really break this down into two distinct approaches. Approach number one is what we call a strategic category. And this you have very little control over. This is truly the category that the analyst creates. And just, as you are well aware, you can't have a category of one. I think the number is like you need to have 8 competitors even to have a category. And in so saying this, the strategic categories evolve. The analysts juggle them around and create new categories as the technology evolves. AI has had a huge impact in changing categories, but that's the strategic category that the analysts own. You as a company can own something that we call the visionary category. Now, the visionary category works with the strategic category, not in opposition to it. And the visionary category is something that you can speak about in a way that the market understands that one unique thing you do differently than anyone else. And you make this part of your core messaging and positioning. That category that you solve for should be understood, but it is your visionary category. And it is rare where we see the vision and strategic categories become the same. I think you have to fight equally hard to be in the top place in strategic, as well as leveraging that visionary category to really expand.
Right. That's a great point. I think a lot of folks should understand they have to play within the ecosystem that exists while simultaneously trying to, position themselves as unique in a fun way. So that's some great advice. A lot of folks sort of think of those players as pay to play, right? Do you feel like they're truly agnostic, that they really do give every company in an industry category sort of a fair shot at being in the upper right portion of the quadrants?
Yeah, I think it is easy to say that you're a larger company, you pay a larger share for number of seats at a given analyst, and therefore you have undue influence. I think that is an immature thought. I believe very strongly, not everyone has to like the analysts, but the analysts work in a certain way. There's a very strong wall between their selling side and their analyst side. I have an analyst on my team, a former Forrester analyst, who, has confirmed for me very clearly that that is the case. I think the important part for folks to really focus on about this is one, it's never too early to speak to analysts. Early companies should go to analysts. You don't have to pay them anything. You could be a Gartner Cool vendor and pay them nothing, because in the end, you have to remember the analyst's job is to get smart about a segment. The worst thing that can happen to them is that their knowledge becomes stale. And if anything, that is the complaint that many analysts get, is they're not cutting edge enough. And so in recent years, they've worked very hard to be able to do that. And so I think that it's convenient to say, oh, I didn't, spend enough, so therefore I didn't get in there. Let me add one last comment on this, which is analysts, for right or for wrong, are list checkers. They define a category and it has particular elements to it. It is your job. Analysts will take a briefing at any time. Your job in doing an effective briefing is to help the analysts understand what are the particular components that should be defining the category today. And if anything, that is where many smaller organizations fail, is leveraging that really strength that they have with analysts to help inform them and change how the category is being graded.
Right, right. Well, let's switch gear to a challenge that I think B2B CMOs and to some extent B2C CMOs face a lot, which is this idea between demand harvesting and demand creation. When it's a mature category, there's already a lot of demand out there because people know a lot about it and they're using Google and increasingly potentially chatbots to learn more about the category. And they're essentially raising their hands saying, I need to solve this problem, or I need this something that does this, whether it's, going back to the old acronyms like CRM platform, which evolved from Salesforce automation and broke into its own thing. Or it could be, data clean rooms or something like that. So you've got these folks raising their hands in search or raising their hands in ChatGPT or Gemini or Claude. And that's essentially demand harvesting. The person already knows they need it. You're not really creating demand. You're just relying on those hand raisers. And to some extent, the Capteras of the world and the G2s of that world, right? They're also there in that demand harvesting portion of the funnel. But you reach a plateau pretty quickly at that point, right? So you sort of have to move to mid and upper funnel. And then the challenge becomes like, oh, from a resource allocation and from a budget allocation, how far up into the funnel do I want to go? And do I want to start sponsoring, golf outings and, things that are very upper funnel as a marketer? So when your CMOs ask you for advice around that, like sort of what does the media mix look like between demand creation and demand harvesting? Do you have any sort of sage words for them?
Wow, sage words is a big term, but I will accept it to say we have it's one of my go-to sayings that brand plus demand equals growth. You can put a lot of money against brand. It doesn't always generate the kind of growth you want if you don't have the tactical demand gen engine to harvest it, take advantage of it, etc.
Right.
On the other hand, we find that if you are incredibly just super technical on your digital demand gen and optimize, you will reach a plateau without a brand underneath it to create, you'll excuse the analogy, the wind beneath your wings to move, up on that growth curve.
Yeah.
And so I think that, for our portfolio companies, the advice is really to take a TAM-centric view.
Hmm.
And I don't like TAM as much as I like SAM, so I will step it down one level and
Yeah.
say, as you look at that service addressable market that your product can actually hit,
Hmm.
tell me just a little bit about how you're going to unlock that. What is your game plan? And there is both mature and immature. There's markets geos that are strong. There are verticals that are strong. There are going to be target personas which you've been particularly effective at connecting with. And so the net of all of this is if you're going to unlock that SAM, if you're going to truly get the kind of lift that your organization is looking for in terms of growth, you're going to have a little bit of both of those strategies that are both harvesting existing, but also creating from the new. And it's that mix that is the ultimate equation that drives that growth.
That's great advice, I think, for any marketer. Absolutely. There's an interesting sort of resurgence of this concept of word of mouth. And some folks basically say, oh, that's just like social media. But you've also got sort of this other tangent in the B2B world, which would be, folks talking to each other in communities or the B2B influencer, right?
Right.
Who's just considered to be a subject matter expert in a category. And so there has an inordinate amount of sway around people's decision as they whittle down the
Yes.
folks they're deciding. So I'd love to get your current point of view on sort of the new generation of word of mouth, like and how has it changed since the early days of word of mouth?
So, you may have seen we recently put out a blog on modern word of mouth and why we think it is modern.
Right,
And I think we should step back to what the issue is.
right,
The core issue is in a world of way too many noisy markets, the ability for any particular organization to cut through that clutter is challenging.
yeah,
And I think that AI, if anything, is going to make this incredibly harder. If you can imagine this dystopian vision of, the AI bot writing the email and the co-pilot in Outlook reading the email, and like there are no humans involved, you're going to have to find more authentic ways to connect with people. And the I'm not arguing that there are net new tactical channels out there. Yes, there's communities. Yes, there is social. Yes, there are peer reviews. Yes, there are analyst write-ups. All of this is percolating, creating for you a brand. What we're arguing makes it modern is much more about the targeting here of first prioritizing what it is that you're going after, harvesting all of that using generative tools, AI tools that will bring this in, analyzing it, augmenting it, and then pushing out that message to multiple tactical channels. The strategy here is more than social listening. It's more than just leveraging social media. It's using generative tools to do what humans can't do. And that is they're incredibly strong at bringing together multiple ideas, synthesizing those ideas, and when prompted correctly, creating the kind of breakthrough messaging that differentiates yourself from competitors. And my last point here, we would do these kinds of things in the past on a periodic basis. I think what the technology allows us to do going forward is a continual harvesting and analyzing and reacting. You don't have to be on your back heels reacting to competitors' change in messaging. Once that's in there, putting it in the model, finding out what you're saying, what you need to change, how you might do this, it really turbocharges our capacity to have more authentic communications that is personalized to the needs, not creepy. And that is the real difference here.
Yeah, well, the one theme about sort of word of mouth is obviously that it's humans' mouths, even if they're augmented with a little bit of AI. But it's the human element. And another area that where sort of humanity really plays a huge outsized role is at events. And you've got background in events. And so I'd love to hear if you feel like events are back post-pandemic in the same way as they were pre-pandemic, or if there's really something fundamental that's changed around face-to-face marketing, face-to-face selling, and events.
Yeah, and not to be a one-trick pony here about AI, but I will argue again that events are taking on an increasingly important role for organizations because if you want authentic human-to-human connection, it is in the event world. And by the way, we have a portfolio company, Bizzabo, that does incredible work on both live events, virtual events, hybrid events, and bringing all of that together. And I think you need all of those tools as part of the go forward. But I would add on top of that, that if you can imagine what today's events are, the events are a reason for you to bring together a community. And so I'll use RSA as an example within the cybersecurity space. Here's an event, a massive event that brings together the cybersecurity community. I'm weird I chose that one when Black Hat is going on right now. But nonetheless, I will use RSA as that example. But what goes on at that event has almost little to do what goes on the floor, although people like to walk the floor and see the booths. And I tell my portfolio companies, if your goals around this event are scans, you've missed the whole point of why you're here, why you're spending this money. You're spending this money to create the opportunity to authentically connect with people. And all the work that you do leading up to the event, during the event, and post-event, that isn't sort of just, oh, let's throw them into a nurture campaign, but more about like, how am I going to connect these people, bring them in there, have real conversations, give them an understanding of what my brand stands for. I always tell my CMOs that the biggest mistake that they make in terms of figuring out their CAC is taking the full cost of a trade show and allocating that against demand gen because
Mhm.
it makes it look incredibly expensive for lead gen. But if, on the other hand, you are real about allocating that budget against why you're really going to an event, which is part of its PR, part of its AR, part of its brand building, part of its pipeline acceleration, business development, the proportion that is purely the scanning is much smaller than you imagine as to why you're going to these events. So, bottom line on this, I think events remain important. I think events are going to increase in importance. I do think that they will take different shapes, though, going forward, and that is good.
I think, yeah, I would agree with you. I'm an investor in a couple of companies where events are foundational to them. And interestingly, I think they'll probably, one of them, I don't know if it's been announced yet, is already in the process of an exit, and the other one will probably exit shortly. So I feel like events are back, and I put my money where my mouth is on that.
There you go.
Um, but, one of the things I'd love to talk about as it relates to search and within my SEO practice, this is the hottest area for us right now. There's this idea that for certain queries, people aren't necessarily going to engage with a search engine results page because even in Perplexity, the SERP looks different. And then you've got
Yep.
ChatGPT, Claude, and Gemini, where the SERP is completely gone to some
Right.
extent. Although now with some hybrids appearing, perhaps it's
Yep.
not gone entirely. But it's certainly changed it because the algorithm is changing and the way in which one shows up in a chat LLM result is very different than a traditional SEO algorithm. So LLMO, large language model optimization, has become like the fastest growing part of my SEO practice. Do you feel like the B2B folks understand that they have to invest in content creation, content syndication, and then the promotion of that content to influence the LLMs?
Yeah, I think we could do a whole podcast about all the elements there. You may have seen, one of the posts we put on early in about search generative experience, but like as AI overviews, GPT search, the whole search world is being upended.
Yeah.
And I think it would be dangerous for anyone to believe that what has worked in quote unquote traditional organic optimization is going to work in this new world is mistaken. We're doing a ton of research right now to understand what are the differences between the search results that we're seeing, how much real estate. Google is changing the real estate quite a bit. I would put out this following idea as sort of a guiding principle, which basically is to say that the old world, the what I call BG world, before generative world, was a word-driven world. So you could do a search that was single word, a few words thrown, and Google loved that. And it gave you results, and all was good. The massive change is from single word to vectors. And that move to vectors means what you're asking is no longer the single word, but the strung together group of words that represent the vectorization. And even as search tools use RAG to get better results, and they're focused, the real paradigm shift that is happening, and Google, I believe, is prepared to blow everything up for the vectorized world. Shopping is going to be different on Google. Images are going to be different on Google. And so while people think that, Google somehow keeps stumbling and keeps having problems and all this, true, but they have a built-in advantage that no one else has. It is certainly theirs to lose. And while the idea of using a ChatGPT or a Bing or any of these tools, Perplexity, to do search is interesting right now, I think people's habit is going to be to go what they're most comfortable with. And the tactical pieces to support this, yes, content matters, but your website's going to still matter. And all of these pieces, I'm not casting aspersions by saying I don't think anyone knows exactly how to do this. We know some directional ideas, and we're continuing to research, and we're advising our portfolio companies on the things they should be doing. We're able to tell them how much of their organic search is up for disruption. Some companies are much more than others, and there are still pieces that are going to matter regardless in the equation. So the net is we are in the most disruptive time on search, and that has incredible implications across all of digital marketing.
That's great advice. People should understand the risk profile that they have, given how people discover them and their solutions and products now, and the extent to which some of that may be replaced by chatbot related queries as opposed to SERP related queries. I'd love to jump over to a category of conversation that isn't ordinarily included in marketing conversations, but is a passion area for you, which is sustainability. So a lot of folks are of the opinion that, over focus on sustainability from a sort of corporate perspective is a drag on the bottom line. And so I'd love to hear how you have conversations with folks, either in your educational role within Insight, but also, in your educational role within a university context of, how you frame that conversation about, can you create a win-win scenario where you're doing things and meeting sustainability goals, but also driving the business forward at the same time?
Yeah, I think again, a whole session worth of ideas on this, but I'll point out a few things I think are particularly relevant to business and their role. Climate change is the existential threat of our time, and we're not waiting for climate change. Climate change is here. We're seeing it in extreme heat. We're seeing it in extreme weather. We're seeing it in just how things are changing in our planet. And these are not things that are happening because of just the ebb and flow of the world. This is anthropogenic. It's man-made. It is scientifically proven, which I find incredible how we trust science in every aspect of our life except this one. And so
I guess inconvenient, right? As Gore would say.
yes. And so as you start thinking about business being the critical component here, it is wonderful for people to go to COP conferences and talk about this, but that is against the backdrop of what will business do.
Mhm.
And I think there are several points that everyone should accept. One is there is a path that we are going down, and the US may choose to be part of it or not, meaning the world is shifting. And as Obama said at one point, he said, even if you don't believe in climate change, why wouldn't you want to take advantage of this massive economic opportunity? The second piece of the puzzle is because transition is hard and change is hard, there are investments that are going to need to be made that may take a longer payoff. And our public companies are very much incented on every quarter and every quarter's results. And so there's a need to take a longer lens on that. And then the last part of it is innovation. Without innovation, we will not solve these problems. And as an investor, we invest. We are not a sustainability investment firm. We're a software firm, but we're investing in companies in carbon credits. We're investing in companies that help use technology to stabilize bee colonies. We invest in companies that deal with water. We invest because the technology to do this better can't help but drive bottom line performance. And so I think the thing that hurts my soul the most is that we've allowed this discussion to become politicized.
Right.
And you should remember back in the day, that our most important environmental laws, the establishment of the EPA, Clean Water, Clean Air Acts, were passed during the Nixon administration, a Republican administration. And they were passed because literally our rivers were on fire. And so it wasn't a political discussion. It's our environment. Of course, we're going to do what's necessary. And so I think we're in a very difficult time where this has been allowed to become political instead of what it should be, which is what's important for us all to thrive in this changing environment. And that means adaptation, mitigation, and creating resilient systems. And every organization should be managing the risk against this, and that's going to involve investment. So that's a shortened sort of thesis here, but I hope it gave you what you needed here around sustainability.
Yeah, I mean, we'll have to see. A Climate Week is coming up, I believe, late September here in New York. And so it'd be fascinating to see. I've got several clients involved there, as well as a personal interest in it, given my nonprofit hat that I wear from time to time. So it'll be interesting to see if that, what the press coverage is around it and the extent to which potentially it moves the needle. So were there any topics that we didn't cover in the podcast just now that you feel like marketers should be paying attention to over the next 6 months to a year?
I think we covered most of them. I would tell you that part of what marketers are going to need to do is move from what we might call random acts of GenAI, where they're like, look, I wrote a blog. Look, I edited a picture. Look, and move to really go over what we call the scalability gap of generative AI and start focusing on workflows that can be improved. And that means both restructuring those workflows and adding generative where they can eliminate repetitive, where they can figure out how to do what they're doing better with better information and better insights. And I think, one of the things that, is a little interesting to ponder is that with these types of generative tools, will there be a shift from some activities which were traditionally covered in the sales organization, like SDR outreach, that become handled by marketing because it becomes a technology-driven exercise that marketing can help control the message. And so I think the net of it all is, if you're not focused on if you're only focused on, I'm going to use AI, and not focused on, I'm going to reduce the friction, I'm going to make the process better, you'll never unlock the potential that AI has. And I think organizations make a mistake by just sprinkling it versus being strategic about how they leverage it. So that would be my closing salvo.
Great. Thanks, Gary. I appreciate you joining me and sharing your wisdom so that everybody can benefit from it.
My pleasure.
Kevin Lee's Power Marketing is available on all your favorite podcast networks. Kevin loves helping businesses excel at marketing. Having marketing challenges? Just like Santa in The Miracle on 34th Street, if Kevin can't help you, he'll know someone who can. Find him on LinkedIn, subscribe, or follow.